the same neighborhood, sharing the innocence of childhood and the dreams of youth. Life carried them forward. They graduated from college, found jobs, got married, and each built a family of their own. Yet the bond between them remained unshaken. Then fate took a harsher turn. A war broke out between their country and another, and both men were called to mandatory military service. One dark night, as their camp came under heavy attack, chaos engulfed everything. Amidst the explosions and fire, one of them spotted his friend trapped under the barrage, unable to escape. Without hesitation, he rushed to save him, but destiny had its say. He was killed in the attempt. His sacrifice etched an unhealing wound into the heart of the friend he had tried to protect. Months after the war had ended, tragedy struck again. The fallen soldier's son became gravely ill, his life depending on a kidney transplant. The surviving friend made a decision without a second thought. He donated one of his own kidneys to the boy. It was his way of honoring the memory of his friend, the man who had given his life trying to save him. That act was more than just a gift of life. It was a silent testimony that true friendship does not end with death, and that loyalty sometimes finds its purest form in sacrifice. In 1914, at the very start of World War I, the German army invaded Belgium. As they advanced through the countryside, they encountered an elderly Belgian woman who was sitting outside her small farmhouse, knitting. When soldiers approached, she simply refused to leave her chair. Though powerless, a tiny act of quiet defiance was witnessed and reported by journalists. It became a torpedo. When his crew believed war had already started, his single decision, just saying no, prevented what could have escalated into World War III. A tiny action, a single word, but it may have saved millions of lives. In 1938, in Sydney, Australia, a man named Far Lap O'Reilly, a bookmaker and racing fan, placed a very strange bet. He wagered with friends that he could ride an ostrich through the city streets without falling off. Ostrich riding wasn't completely unheard of. It was sometimes done for entertainment at fairs, but never on crowded city streets. On the agreed day, O'Reilly showed up with a saddled ostrich borrowed from a local zoo. To the amazement of onlookers, he actually managed to climb on and set off. The scene was described in newspapers as both hilarious and chaotic. The ostrich darted unpredictably between trams, startled pedestrians, and even police officers who had no idea how to react. O'Reilly did in fact stay on long enough to win his bet, though the ostrich eventually collapsed in exhaustion, and the zoo demanded it back immediately. The stunt was over in minutes, but it was reported widely, and for a short time, Sydney had the unforgettable image of a bookmaker thundering through the streets on an ostrich. A tiny, absurd moment, but one that briefly turned a whole city into a stage for comedy. A long time ago, there was a proud and cruel king in Egypt. His name was Pharaoh. He told people, "I am your Lord, the highest." He made the children of Israel suffer and live as slaves, but Allah chose his prophet Moses. Musa, peace be upon him. Allah said to him, "Go to Pharaoh and speak kindly to him. Tell him to worship Allah, the one and only." Moses and his brother Aaron walked to Pharaoh's palace. "Pharaoh, we are messengers from Allah. Let the children of Israel go free and do not harm them. And who is your Lord, O Moses?" "Our Lord is the one who created everything and gave it its shape and guidance." Pharaoh didn't believe. So Allah gave Moses miracles. He threw down his staff and it became a great snake. He showed his hand and it shone bright like light. But Pharaoh shouted, "This is magic." And he called all the magicians in Egypt to challenge Moses. Seeing magicians throw their ropes and sticks where they look like snakes, "Oh my Lord, help me." He throws his staff, it turns into a huge serpent and swallows everything the magicians made. "We believe in the Lord of Moses and Aaron." "No, how dare you believe without my permission?" Pharaoh kept refusing. Allah sent him signs, floods, locusts, frogs, lice, and blood. But each time Pharaoh broke his promise, seeing Moses leading the children of Israel out at night. Finally, Allah told Moses to take his people and leave Egypt. Pharaoh and his army chased them until they reached the sea. Moses, raising his staff, "In the name of Allah," the sea splits into dry paths. Moses and his people crossed safely, but when Pharaoh and his soldiers entered, the sea closed and drowned them all. Moses and his people praising Allah with joy. So Allah saved Moses and the children of Israel, and the tyrant Pharaoh was destroyed. Cannot show Prophet Moses, only show light, not Moses' face or body. In 1976, during a meeting of the U.S. Congress, a man named Rep. W. Sterling Cole brought a tiny live frog into the chamber. Why? He wanted to demonstrate the dangers of chemical runoff into waterways in a very literal way. The frog was placed on his desk, hopping around while he gave his speech. The tiny moment became surprisingly memorable. Journalists reported on the frog in Congress, and for a brief time, that little amphibian was arguably more famous than many of the lawmakers present. It didn't change laws overnight, but it did spark conversations about environmental issues, all because of a single small frog in a huge, serious room. A tiny creature, a huge chamber, and a moment so small it almost feels like a historical joke, but it actually happened.
In 1919, a man named Charles Osborne in the United States developed a bizarre condition. He couldn't stop hiccuping. What makes it truly unbelievable is the scale. It wasn't a few hiccups here and there. Charles hiccuped continuously for 68 years. Yes, decades. That's over 2.5 billion hiccups in his lifetime. Doctors were baffled. And Charles became a minor celebrity for a while. But here's the thing. Despite this relentless hiccuping, he lived a relatively normal life. He married, had children, worked on a farm, and even drove a car. People would stop him on the street just to watch him hiccup. It is a moment so tiny in the grand scope of history. A single man's unstoppable hiccup, but it is real, well documented, and absolutely unbelievable.
1952, a man named James F. Phillips, a chemistry student in the U.S., decided to wage a one-man eco-war against pollution, long before environmental activism was mainstream. But instead of giving speeches or writing articles, he did something completely tiny and absurd. He painted tiny messages on rocks near rivers that said things like, "Don't dump here and pollution kills fish." The remarkable part, people actually noticed. The tiny rocks started sparking real awareness about water pollution in his town. Phillips eventually became known as the Fox, a secret environmental activist, and he continued small, almost mischievous acts of activism, like letting harmless dye into polluted streams so people could literally see how dirty the water was. So here's a moment where a single person, with nothing but rocks and paint, managed to make a tiny but real impact on history. A little ripple that helped kickstart bigger environmental awareness. In 1902, an Italian astronomer named Giovanni Schiaparelli was studying Mars when he mistakenly drew canals on the planet S surface. The canals were tiny lines on his sketches, barely noticeable at first, but they sparked worldwide fascination. People began imagining entire Martian civilizations building vast networks of waterways. What is incredible is how something so small, a few thin pencil lines on paper, created a global craze for decades, influencing science, literature, and even early science fiction. Tiny mark, and suddenly everyone was thinking about aliens on Mars. In 1954, in a small town in the UK, a man named Jack Taylor became the center of a very peculiar incident. Jack wasn't causing trouble in any usual way. He wasn't fighting, singing loudly, or spilling drinks. He was laughing. But Jack's laughter was something special. It was infectious, loud, and impossible to ignore. During one busy evening at the local pub, his laughter carried through the room, spreading to other patrons, making conversations nearly impossible. The pub landlord, apparently at the end of his patience, decided to eject Jack from the premises. Imagine that. A man literally being thrown out of a pub for laughing too hard. What makes the story even more remarkable is that the local newspapers picked it up. Headlines like "Man banned from pub for laughing" made Jack a tiny celebrity, and townspeople would chuckle about it for weeks. It's such a small, human, and oddly charming moment in history, a reminder that sometimes the tiniest actions, like laughter, can leave a trace in the historical record. In 1920s England, there was a small monkey named Joey, who had a very unusual job. He worked in a circus, helping to light fireworks during performances. The circus was a lively place, filled with the smells of popcorn and sawdust, and Joey had become something of a minor celebrity among the performers. Audiences loved watching him, not only because he was adorable, but also because he had an uncanny ability to handle the tiny sparks and flames used in the shows. One evening, during a particularly crowded performance, something utterly unexpected happened. Joey, apparently bored or perhaps just mischievous, grabbed a small cloth ball that was lying nearby. In a split second, he darted into the center of the ring, tossing the cloth near a piece of flammable material used for the act. To everyone's astonishment, the cloth caught fire. Panic broke out among some of the performers, but the fire was surprisingly small. Somehow no one got hurt, and the circus staff quickly extinguished it. Here's the twist that makes the story so bizarre. Instead of getting in trouble, Joey became an instant hero. The audience roared with laughter and applause, thinking the little monkey fire starter was part of the act. Newspapers even ran short pieces about the incident, calling him the monkey who could light up the show, quite literally. Over time, Joey's tiny accidental fire became a legendary moment in circus history, celebrated not for destruction, but for sheer unpredictability and charm. It is one of those almost impossible to believe moments where a tiny creature unintentionally became the star of the show, and all without anyone being hurt. A chaotic, yet oddly adorable snippet of history.
In 1978, a man named Larry Walters, nicknamed Lawn Chair Larry, strapped 45 helium-filled weather balloons to a lawn chair and literally flew 16,000 feet into the sky over California. He was just trying to float gently above his backyard, but ended up drifting into controlled airspace near LAX, terrifying pilots and air traffic controllers. He eventually had to shoot some balloons with a pellet gun to come back down safely. Imagine just sitting in a lawn chair and accidentally taking a detour through the airspace of Los Angeles International Airport. What you will do. Here's another tiny, unbelievable moment in history you won't believe actually happened. In 1835, the city of Boston declared rats as a public enemy. Yes, seriously. They were so fed up with rats invading homes and streets that the city offered a bounty for every rat killed. People got creative. Some even used cats, others set clever traps, and some just threw rats into the river. The funniest part? The bounties caused a rat-fighting industry to pop up. People tried to cheat the system by breeding rats or bringing dead rats multiple times. It might sound ridiculous, but this shows how humans will go to crazy lengths to solve even the smallest problems. History isn't always epic battles or kings. Sometimes it's tiny, weird, and hilarious. Crazy, right? What would you have done if you were in Boston in 1835? Comment below.
You know what the shortest war in history was? On August 27, 1896, a war broke out between Britain and Zanzibar. But it wasn't your typical long battle. The conflict started because of a succession dispute over the Sultanate of Zanzibar. The previous sultan died, and a new one took the throne without Britain's approval. Britain supported a different candidate, and tensions quickly escalated. British warships were sent to Zanzibar's harbour. The Sultan had a few older ships and fortifications, but they were no match for the modern British Navy. As the morning fog lifted, cannons fired, smoke filled the air, and the sound of battle echoed across the harbour. Locals watched in disbelief as the bombardment continued. And then, in less than an hour, the Sultan surrendered. That's right, the entire war lasted only 38 minutes, shorter than most TV show episodes. People often say history moves slowly, but this war was over before anyone could even finish their morning tea. Imagine a war shorter than your lunch break. Historians still talk about it today, calling it a bizarre and almost comical moment in military history. The Sultan had no real chance, yet it's remembered as one of the most extraordinary events ever. Crazy, right? What would you have done if you were in Zanzibar that day? Would you have watched from the harbour or run for cover? Comment below. And if you enjoyed this, there are so many other tiny, unbelievable moments in history you won't believe actually happened. Stay tuned for more. Long ago, in the misty lands of ancient Britain, there was no true king to unite the people. The lords fought among themselves, and the land was filled with chaos. But one day, in the heart of a small village, a mysterious stone appeared. And in the stone was a sword, shining, unmovable, and magical. On the blade were the words, "Whoever pulls this sword from the stone shall be the rightful king of England." Many tried, proud knights, powerful lords, and mighty warriors. Yet none could move the sword even an inch. Then came a boy named Arthur. He was not a knight, not even a lord. He was simply a squire, helping his brother prepare for a tournament. When his brother lost his sword, Arthur searched for another, and found the sword in the stone. Without pride, without fear, he placed his hands on the hilt, and with one simple pull, the sword slid free. The crowd fell silent. The impossible had happened. A boy humble and pure of heart was chosen by destiny. Arthur became king. And with his legendary sword Excalibur, he led his people with wisdom and courage. His name would echo through the ages as the once and future king. Do you know what the shortest war in history was? On August 27, 1896, a war broke out between Britain and Zanzibar. But the crazy part? The entire war lasted only 38 minutes. The British ships started bombarding, and in less than an hour, the Sultan surrendered. That's a war that didn't even last a full episode of a TV show.
فاصبر لحكم ربك ولا تطع منهم آثما أو كفورا واذكر اسم ربك بكرة وأصيلا ومن الليل فاسجد له وسبحه ليلا طويلا